So this is the question I get from a lot of people, and the question is, do you fish rivers? And the short answer is yes, but they're rivers that have been turned into reservoirs. Let me explain all this to you, what I mean by all this and this terminology, because this terminology may vary depending on where you're at, so it's kind of good to clear it up. Basically, all the reservoirs that we have in the southeast are built on rivers. We only have a few natural lakes, and those are down toward the eastern part of the state in the low country. Everything here, all of our lakes, are man-made. They were rivers that were dammed up. So technically, it's on a river. It's just a dammed up river. Now, I think what a lot of y'all are referring to is, do you fish rivers like maybe the Mississippi River, Ohio, Missouri River, places like that, that are not dammed up, that are major bodies of water unimpeded by dams? And I really don't. We've got those around here, but a lot of these areas where I'm at, near where I'm at, have been dammed up and are a reservoir to one extent or another. We do have some smaller rivers that I really don't fish. Mainly it's more because of my boat than anything. A lot of these places are super shallow, rocky, that type thing, and I really don't venture into them with the boats I've got. It's not designed for that. So to give you some input on how these things fish and basically how they function, at least the rivers below the reservoirs, some are good and some are bad. I'm going to tell you kind of what makes some of them good and some of them bad. Again, all these rivers, all these reservoirs are, dammed up rivers. And depending on where the reservoir is and what's upstream from it, really dictates how good the fishing is in the river arms. Some of these reservoirs have pretty long river runs. I'm sitting here on Lake Wateree today, and it's got a pretty good river run up to the Cedar Creek Dam, which is the dam above this. Now you go below this, and the river that runs out of there runs all the way down to Santee Cooper, and it's a massively long river run. That's a true river down there, and I really don't fish those kind of waters. I wish I was closer to it to spend some time on it, but it's a pretty good haul to get to. And that area there is such a long river run that it's enough for stripers to spawn in. So that tells you just how long that is. That's pretty much the way it was, 100 years ago before any of the lakes. But what those rivers are like and what's upstream from them dictates just how much life they have. As I was saying, here in the upper section of Lake Wateree, there's a lot of fish in here generally. And part of that reason is the turbidity of the water and the nutrients in the water. It's nutrient-rich water. You get onto a lake like we'll go Mountain Island. That's a very good example. It is right below Lake Norman, which is North Carolina's largest lake. This lake is huge. The water turnover is a long, long time. There's a technical name for that. Can't remember what it is. All you biologists know it, but it takes a long time to turn that water over in that lake, basically move the water through it. I've heard people say that a drop of water that comes into the lake on the upper end takes a year to go through it. Because of that, the water on the lower end, where the dam is very, very clear. A lot of the nutrients have been deposited further up the lake, and it's just clear water. So the water coming out of that dam, Cowan's Ford Dam, that dumps into Mountain Island, that lake is gin clear water. As a matter of fact, Mountain Island Lake is the water source for most of the municipalities around there, including Charlotte, North Carolina. It's just very clear water, very, not a lot of nutrients in it. And consequently, that river section up through there, while it has fish at times, it is not loaded with fish like this river that I'm sitting in right now. This here is a little dirtier, dingier water, a little more nutrient rich, and that basically translates through the food system. You know, you've got the micro stuff feeding on micro stuff in the water. You've got shad and fish like that feeding on that stuff and on up the food chain. There's just a lot more food and nourishment for the fish. So it depends on the river that you're into. You know, Lake Wiley is a good example. On the Catawba arm, that stretch, not really nutrient rich because Mountain Island feeds the Catawba. You know, a little further down starts to get some inflow from some creeks, some dirty water, and it starts to come to life a little bit. You know, the opposite is the South Fork, which is a dirtier, dingier river that dumps in, and it has, it's a free-flowing river that has no real dams on it or impoundments. There's a few little low-rise dams, but no real impoundments. And consequently, more nutrients, more fish. So you kind of have to look at the system you're fishing if you want to get into these rivers and fish them. One thing about them is if they've got fish, most of them become current driven, and because the dam releases and what goes on there, these fish develop a different feeding cycle than a main reservoir fish. And I'll make this argument to the end that those are like fishing for two different fish. The fish in the river are going to behave differently, and the fish up the you know, in the reservoir are going to behave differently. As you can see here on Lake Wateree, it's kind of a stained looking water. It's a it just has a, I don't know, swampy look to it, even though it's not draining out of any swamp. And that means a lot, believe it or not. This lake, or this, you know, river has always been kind of a dirty tea looking color to it. I think the color has changed in the past decade. Some of the old timers that fish for bait here, throwing a cast net, trying to catch bait to sell, have said that it's affected the bait. There's not as much bait as there used to. I don't know if that's true or not, but there's definitely something to this type water. It starts to have more nutrients in it. Now, don't confuse that with muddy water, but this is just dingier looking water that has a stain to it. Typically, that has more life to it. But as I was saying, I do believe the river fish live a different life, act differently, and feed differently than the main lake fish on a reservoir, and I think it's current driven. I think the current dictates when they eat, when they frenzy, that type of thing. Now, most of the lakes have somewhat of a regular cycle to releasing water. Obviously, heavy flow events, it's continuous. And, you know, that, while can be good and spark a bite, I think those fish kind of go to a different mode after a while of that constant current. I think they behave a little differently than fish that live in a river system all the time. It's funny, some fish like that. Some fish like the river. And we told this story before on my guide trips about a fish that Jeff Manning caught in a catfish tournament years ago. We tagged it and released it about 18 miles away in that tournament that night. And I caught it about a year later, tagged fish, called Jeff, said, "Hey, where did you catch that fish at?" He told me, "I was literally fishing a quarter of a mile from where he caught that fish." So that fish swam 3 miles down a creek from the boat landing where we released it, and then back up a river 15 miles to where it wanted to be. And it liked that area for some reason. Now, this is an area that is not loaded with fish, and you know, but it liked it for some reason. Some fish, you know, I think they like the reservoirs. I think they like the main lake without current. You know, it's you know, it may be what leads to so many big fish growing to that size in some of the bigger reservoirs like Santee Cooper, Kerr Lake, where the world record is from, because they don't fight current all the time. Some of them, they're just predisposed to be in that, and that's the stuff they like. Maybe they got them on a little rock they like to lay behind, who knows. But I think the fish are two different types of fish, and there's two different ways to fish for them, two different tactics, and that's totally different than the fish that are in a major river that does not have dams, that has constant flow. And if I had one of those rivers around here, it would be interesting to learn that. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not I don't have the time to figure that out. That takes some time. You need to be on a body of water like that a lot. You know, I've said that before. Any type fishing you do, you need to have time on the water to master the skill set. And fishing for catfish on a constantly flowing river, totally different ball game than fishing for them in a dam fed tail race reservoir setup. And I've heard that from, you know, guys that fish rivers that have come here and fished tournaments before. So it's a different ball game, and it makes it interesting, so to speak, because those fish are in constant current all the time. You're either picking them off where they're staged up at or where they're going to feed. And I think the ball game shifts around in these releases in these reservoirs where I'm at, where right now they're not releasing any water. There is no flow going on right now. So these fish are probably up roaming around doing some feeding. I heard some stripers up on top of the water a few minutes ago. There's some activity. The shad are in totally different places than they would be once the current starts ripping. Now, you know, during Helene and some other big major rain events, this place can be stroking with water for days at a time. That repositions where these fish go. Some fish will pull up into here when that happens. They will pull out of the main reservoir when they sense that current. It can create some activity, especially if there's a big wash of bait. But you know, it's like I said, it's a different dynamic fishing these bodies of water, and there's different stuff to look for, and there's different things that make different legs, different river legs of these places fish better than others. So just give you a little food for thought, some stuff to think about there and stuff to consider. There's a lot of varieties out there. They're not all equal is what it comes down to. Not all rivers fish the same. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. While they all hold fish, you can catch a good fish in any of them at any time. You can catch a lot of fish, but as far as being an overall place where you hold a lot of fish, they're not all created equal. So keep that in mind when you're fishing somewhere, and if you're catching them or if you're not catching them. So hope you guys have a good day on the water.